Hi, Rick. It's good to see you.
Hey, good morning, Keith. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. It's great to see you as always. Let's do a show on doing things that are tough.
Okay.
Okay, you want to kick us off?
Wow. Well, let me think for a minute. I think probably the hardest thing that I have to deal with, I mean, things that is most difficult for me is having difficult conversations. Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes I tend to ignore a festering problem, something that I see that I think upsets me or that I could work out, but I have a reluctance to try to confront somebody. And that comes up in a number of different ways. This has plagued me all my life. Attempting to try to talk something through with a boss, or when I became a boss, trying to talk something out about an underperforming employee. And then, of course, there's always the issue of, discussing things that are very personal and have to do with your love relationship. All of those things create real difficulty for me. I think difficult conversations, I guess, would be my category of what is tough. And I guess what I've learned over the years is probably the best thing is to start the conversation without defensiveness. Try to be clear about what it is that's the upset cause and try to get that on the table and at least start the conversation without trying to defend any position that I have. And then my next thing that I learned, I think the hard way, as we all do learn the hard way, is to listen for whatever it is that they're saying back, whatever the meaning is behind the words that they're talking about. It may not be the words that they're using, but it may be something that's hidden within those words that you really need to tease out to really understand what the person on the other side of the conversation is feeling. And I think and it's almost inevitable, depending on how serious the conversation is, but I think it's inevitable that there's going to be accusations or disappointment voiced by the other person and you. Um, there's going to be maybe attacks along with those accusations. And I think I learned to stay calm and to stay in the conversation and not slam the door and walk away, which is what I used to do when I was a younger man. And so I think staying in the conversation, staying balanced, staying calm, listening for what the other person is saying, and trying to understand their position, but also doing it without defensiveness is important. And then lastly, I think one thing that has helped me is to try to remember that this is emotional. You're in a land of emotion rather than rationality. But you want to get, or I want to get from the point of the emotion into another realm of reality, which is the productive problem solving realm. Um, so those are the difficult conversations are really tough for me. And those few little things that I just said tend to help me. But by God, they are very, very difficult. And I would love to hear your take on how you deal with difficult conversations or things that are tough in your life.
Rick, thanks a lot. I guess, when I was in school, in graduate school, I took a communications course and they named the four conflict management styles.
Oh,
And of those conflict management styles, there were four. There was, constructive, defensive, um, uh, constructive, defensive, destructive, and also avoidance.
mm,
Of the four, the one that was the most problematic was avoidance.
yeah.
It's the most problematic. And I found myself, with difficult conversations, I think the other person that I'm having the conversation with in my past has made either conversations easier or more difficult. So if it was somebody who had a practice, the conversation was very easy to have it with them. If the conversation was with someone that I had a romantic interest in, it could be challenging to have those conversations, especially if it was something that was sensitive, like, things that were my preference and I didn't feel like they were meeting my preference, or if, the relationship had, come to, its end of the road and I need to have a conversation about that. And oftentimes in both cases, I would do avoidance and it would just get worse and worse. So I really learned to handle those things better over time and just using the practice to do so. The biggest thing with the tough conversations were I soon learned that people were challenged in having those with me, those
Mhm.
difficult conversations with me. I was very unapproachable, and I learned that in ToBeRe. I actually did a course for Mayo Clinic on difficult conversations. Many colleagues were coming to me and they were having trouble having these conversations with their peers or with their superiors, and or they had an employee reporting to them that was difficult, like there was a Keith 1.0 that they have had to have a conversation with. And so I just told them what happened, what I designed for me, and mine was in To Be Re. There were one person would pick moments in which they could talk to me. I had no idea this was going on, but they really had to gauge what my mood was
Mhm.
before they got. That's so unfair to them, to where they have to, tiptoe around how I'm showing up or how I might react before they have a conversation with me. And they made a request of me that was a really simple request. But on reflection, depending on what kind of morning I was having, that could have gone sideways. It was such a simple request that if I was being Keith 2.0, it'd have been so easy. Like, of course. But if I'd been 1.0, I would have made that a problem. And so what I learned is that she and others had wanted to have these kind of conversations or make requests to me, but were afraid to. And I considered them friends. And I thought this was so unfair and a burden on the friendship that I made a commitment to change. And part of that change was for me to do a deep dive and really examine how I react when people bring things to my attention or offer me feedback and I'm not open to it. And the way that I react is I become defensive, which is what you mentioned. I start to point out ways in which they are falling short themselves. So how could they possibly be asking this of me? Or pointing out what I'm doing. I would distance myself from them internally. They wouldn't know it, but I would be distancing myself and making a commitment that this relationship has changed forever. They wouldn't know it, but I would be given inside, I would be, erecting a wall between us, and I would be making them wrong along the way. So I designed a tool that I gave to people in ToBeRe, and the way the tool worked was people would come to me and say, Keith, I need to talk to you. It's a very serious conversation. And it's one that's so important that I can't let more time pass by without addressing this. But what almost stopped me were a couple of fears in which I want to share with you. But in the face of those fears, I'm going to move forward because our friendship, our relationship is so important to me. And then they would go through listing all the fears. And the fears would be how I would react. You will become defensive. You will you will look at me as if you're listening, but you're not listening. You'll be thinking about what you're going to say back. You
Yeah.
would find a way to make me wrong for what I'm sharing. You would punish me in ways that I would not even know. You would distance yourself from me. And with every fear that they named, I started to let go of that. It became disarming me of reacting that way. And it'd be the equivalent of a parent who has a kid and they tell the kid, you can come to me with anything that happens today, no matter what it is, you can come to me. I promise I won't get mad. But in the past, all they did was get mad. So the kid comes and says, Mom or Dad, I need to talk to you. Before I go any further, I got to share a few of my fears. My fear is that you're going to make this about you. My fear is that you're going to punish me. My fear is you're going to say, how could you let this happen? And they go through naming all these fears that the way the parent will react. And guess what the parent doesn't do? They don't react in any of those ways. You know, it's so effective. And I've had like so many people use this tool, and then it creates a space to really have a conversation. And the follow-up of that is to, you know, thank the person for having this conversation with you. And if you're the one delivering the conversation, to share with them ways in which you want to partner moving forward. So in my case, what people said, I want to be able to come to you and talk to you about things without you reacting, in a negative way or without those reflective problematic behaviors showing up. when I address something with you, and then we can work it out together. And that was so effective for me, the way that they went about it after I gave them this tool, because I had to give it to everybody. And after I gave them the tool, that every single time we were able to move forward, their friendship was strengthened, and I grew. And they had psychological safety to really talk to me. So difficult conversations is definitely one of the things that's tough on the top of the list. One thing in the past that was tough was facing that IRS when they came knocking for their money. That was tough. And for other people, it's different things. You know, it's putting down the bottle, it's overeating and being committed to their nutrition, or keeping commitments when that alarm goes off to wake up in the morning. It's different for everybody, but right up there at the top for me, Rick, was difficult conversations, and I really worked hard using my practice to be open, and so far, you know, from what people have told me, I've really grown in that area.
You have indeed. I think just being around you, I've learned a lot of how to deal with things that you don't want to deal with. Just watching you go through the process that you go through. I love those tips that you just gave as well. The idea of facing your fears. What is it that you're fearing that's going to happen? I think once we talk about fear, once we talk about what the issue is, it diminishes its power over us in
Yes.
some way. Not completely, but it tones it down enough so you can still go forward and have that difficult conversation. Well, Keith, thank you for those great tips. I really appreciate hearing how you deal with this kind of thing, and I'm going to apply some of your ideas the next time I have a difficult conversation, which will probably be in an hour.
Hey, Greg, you know, I'll just say one thing to end. The difficult conversations, or me, you know, designing this tool and sharing it with other people so that they would be empowered to really kind of level up our friendship, because there was an imbalance in the friendship. I was the one who was dictating the relationship, and that's unfair to other people that you call friends or your loved ones. And I want to give that up. You know, I wanted people to feel empowered. I think it's interesting when I hear about friends or couples that have to ask for permission to do certain things as if they're, you know, children. And it's such an imbalance in those kinds of relationships. And I don't want people to feel that way, you know, and it was really important for me to work on that. So that's where the practice comes in. Is I didn't have the practice in which the manner in which we do it now, but I did have this intentionality of wanting to grow, wanting to be better, and to serve others. And when I discovered that I wasn't doing that, it really became the catalyst for me wanting to change. I wanted to be my really my best self. So Rick, I love you. Thank you for today's show.
Thank you, Keith. I love you. Bye bye. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.